Without further ado, let me introduce to you my fellow panelists in this third and last panel of the day, of the afternoon. First off, we have Libertad o Guerra. Libertad is an anthropologist, curator, and cultural organizer and producer who has led the creation of incubation spaces and collectives of Latinx POC cultural production organizing, education, and environmental justice activism in New York City. In 2020, she became the executive director of the Clemente Soto Vélez Cultural and Education Center in the Lower East Side, Loisaida, here in New York City. She has received numerous awards for her work. She is also a co-founder of the South Bronx Unite Environmental Justice Coalition, serves as a member of the Mott Haven Port Morris Community Land Stewards Board, and most recently co-founded the LXNY Latinx Arts Consortium of New York and the Shape of Cities to Come Institute Certificate and Peership Program. Try saying that 3 times fast. For advanced urban practitioners. Libertad, can you join me on the stage? Let's hear it for Libertad. Next we have José Pepe Flores, who is a longtime resident of the Lower East Side, Loisaida, where he has been a community activist focused primarily, but not exclusively, in the areas of early childhood education, affordable housing, community gardens, and public spaces. In 2022, he co-founded La Sala de Pepe y Fotoespacio, a space dedicated to building and strengthening community through arts, culture, and memory. Pepe, can you join us, please? Big hand for Pepe, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Jorge Díaz, a co-founder of the AgitArte Radical Arts Collective in 1997, and an editor of the book When We Fight, We Win. He is a puppeteer, popular educator, and organizer with over 20 years of experience, and is also a founding member of Papel Machete, a street theater puppetry group dedicated to education, agitation, and solidarity work in 21st century Puerto Rico and its diaspora. Jorge. So the way we decided to structure this conversation is we're interested in seeing connections between pasts or past present, right, or the present past, right, because they're still here with us, the near present and futures, specifically through the lens of the radical imagination, which is a concept that, as I said earlier today, is intimately related to the idea of a radical tradition, right? How do we not only fight injustices in the present, but how do we imagine, what that other world that we feel and know is possible, but that isn't quite here yet, right? So we're going to begin talking a little bit about the present pasts. Libertad is going to start us off by talking a little bit about the histories of the early histories of activism in the Lower East Side, Loisaida. Just to kick it off with a little bit of context, I want to note that this morning we heard from former members of the 3 best-known radical organizations in New York City of the 1970s, but there was another organization that emerged earlier in the mid-1960s that is often forgotten, but equally, if not more, I wouldn't say more, but equally important to the Puerto Rican radical tradition as we are reimagining it here. And I'm talking about the Real Great Society, RGS, an offshoot of which later started calling itself Charas, which is based on the first names of its founding members, which became an important referent in the history of the Lower East Side and Loisaida, even though it did not articulate an explicitly revolutionary ideological stance in the same way that the Lords, the PSP, or the Comité MIMP did. RGS Charas was indeed radical in its use of confrontational tactics, such as squatting, for example, and always expressed solidarity with Puerto Rican and struggles in Puerto Rico as well, and Puerto Rican struggles generally. And it lent its spaces, such as El Bohío Cultural and Community Center, to other community and political organizations. So Libertad, can you tell us a little bit more about that early history of the Real Great Society, also known as Charas?
Thank you.
Or would you like to?
they can move along. They're not tied. I can just say, and maybe as a bridge from the previous panel that was fascinating, that this project and some of the slides that you see at the beginning are part of an exhibition that is now an online digital exhibit and tool about, it's called Activist Estates of the Lower East Side. And a lot of it is drawn from CENTRO archives, actually, that were not really processed, especially the Chara's archives. And it was an exhibit, and it's part of that, not only a digitization, because we wanted it to live on beyond the exhibit that we did, but also a way of interpreting the past, because archives alone don't tell you the story. You need to contextualize it. So it's that bridge that we were trying to build, and I invite you all to visit it as a companion to the book that also exists. It's awkward for me to be given the context of the legacy of the Loisaida movement as a state of mind, and also so many actions when we have Pepe who lived all through it. But maybe precisely because I didn't live through it, and I've just been in awe since I got here to New York as a diasporican in the late 90s. I think it's also influenced just my filter about how I go through life and the essence of art and organizing. So I would say that Loisaida stands as a distinctive enclave, emblematic of the Nuyorican community's adept maneuvers in tropicalizing the northern urban landscape, shaped over a century of Puerto Rican interpenetration through a revolving door government-sponsored migratory flow that we know of. A land-centric approach to justice held significant weight, especially considering the unique forms of exploitation and the dynamic cartographies of resistance and solidarity often entwined between New York City and Puerto Rico that have happened since Betances. Initiatives to envision alternative land regimes and advocacy of cultural equity represent just some of the ways socially engaged cultural organizing communities confront the neocolonial regimes that impact both ancestral homelands and diasporas alike. While this investment characterized an earlier era, today's challenges stem more from overdevelopment and displacement. But to keep on focusing on the near past, the endeavor to craft a new urban social practice emerges not only in response to urban planning, but also as a defensive stance against exclusion and cultural erasure here in the city. Los Loisaideños indigenously amalgamated those traditions and cultures from their homeland, fashioning new forms of urban artistic expression to weather the blatant disinvestments of those 1970s and 80s. Similarly, Nuyorican and Latina communities across the city utilize this creative process to forge a fresh urban identity amidst adversity. Expressions of belonging in the Lower East Side underwent a transformation after the 1960s. So that's going a bit more backwards, because Puerto Ricans and Black folks found themselves ghettoized, blamed for their self-induced poverty, with a top-down urban planning framework that officially labeled their plight as the Puerto Rican problem. This was an official use by the government. Despite those earlier attempts in the 50s to impose a digestible, assimilated Puerto Rican culture onto their living headquarters and neighborhoods, the radical consciousness of a second-generation Puerto Ricans, the largest migration demographic at the time, seized control of the Lower East Side's built environment. They embraced the once pejorative term Nuyorican. They crafted a new hybrid identity, rebranding the neighborhood as Loisaida. They rebranded themselves, rebranding their approach to owning and making space, and created frameworks for others to emulate. The 60s then saw the emergence of what the real Great Society, so it's a pun, obviously, from the Johnson's Great Society, and it was an activist group led by former Puerto Rican gang leaders such as Chino Garcia, who would later go on to co-found Chara's, which became a catalyst for community innovation, energy, and growth. Alongside initiatives like Adopt a Building, Adopt a Building is what it literally means. Like, it was an era of disinvestment, like the buildings were completely empty, but still that initiative exemplified communities reclaiming and reshaping a space, asserting a right to the city, combating invisibility through space-making futuristic projects, fostering a sense of experimental public belonging, and laying the groundwork for the real Great Society. I've heard that by talking to Chino, that helped later on the Young Lords, giving them office space when they came later in the 60s, and the subsequent theater of struggle that forged that era of counter-institutional movements, including New Yorican poetry movement, and all those other embelecos that we've heard of. So in June '78, and you'll see one of the slides, there was a magazine called Win that typically focused on war, peace, and nonviolent action, and it devoted an entire issue to Loisaida. This was a national magazine, highlighting the community's willingness to share its story beyond its borders. This exposure ended up attracting allies and collaborators to the neighborhood, including a cadre of young architects experimenting with alternative energy and affordable housing models in a pilot homestead building in the east street of the Lower East Side. So by the late 70s, Loisaida had become the epicenter of anti-gentrification activism, with residents actively engaging in placekeeping through sweat equity efforts. Activist artists spearheaded the homesteading movement, community gardens, recycling centers, and explored alternative energy sources, linking environmental concerns with neighborhood revitalization. However, as we know, the cultural richness and working class essence of enclaves like Loisaida can also become targets for deculturalizing economic dynamics amidst real estate speculation, but that comes more to the present, and I leave it there to who?
Thank you for that wonderful background, Libertad. Thank you. Pepe, as I understand, you arrived from Puerto Rico in the early 1970s.
71.
In 71, and I understand that you were already radicalized by your experiences in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
And involvement with some of the groups there. And you arrive in the Lower East Side at a time when all of this, what Libertad is telling us about, was happening. So can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in these struggles? Maybe tell us which specific struggle or struggles you think made the greatest impact on the community and on yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I start, I would like to say hello to the people of Cuba that are trying to connect with us tonight, and I hope they were able to do it. That means hello if you are listening. And the people in Puerto Rico. Yeah, when I arrived to New York City, I got a job at PS 15 on 4th Street between C and D, and somebody told me, well, you're living in Brooklyn, coming here every day, it takes a toll on you. And check these people on Avenue C, Adobe Building. So I went over and I met Chino and Ruth, his wife, and Roberto. And I was able to secure an apartment, $75 for 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and a bathroom. They had one of those boxes, like the Godfather, when they gave the guy the gun. But so I got interested in meeting these guys, just being in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Just like you walk around and you saw them all over the place, and there were things happening that you were invited to, and little by little I got involved in that building, and I moved to another building on 11th Street that was renovated, and then after that building I moved into another one on Avenue C. That's where I live right now for over 40 years, and at that time I stopped working in public school and I became a daycare teacher, and it was a very special daycare for me. The name of it was Children's Meeting. Later on, we changed to Children's Liberation. And I didn't look back. I said, this is my niche. Being a Black Puerto Rican man working with children. It's very important for them to have a male figure in their lives. Somebody that can be gentle and can be firm, and not being not not to stop these conceptions of men as enforcers. I am not the sheriff in here. I'm just a man that understands you and nurtures you. Like I'm telling you, this neighborhood was so many things happening, and then there were the gardens happening. And then in the gardens, I got involved with the gardens because we will use the gardens as a tool, educational tool. Okay? Instead of going to the regular parks, we will go to a garden where children had hands-on on the plot that we had in there, and they were able to roam freely inside the garden. That's part of it. And of course, I still work. I'm dealing with the housing situation in the neighborhood through Guadalupe Building and other organizations that that were making sure that there was affordable housing for everybody. And the other component, or one of the components, was the music. And that's where my passion for music, not only as a dancer, but as a historian, through collecting music and books. And there was a particular place besides the New York Boys Cafe. The New York Boys Cafe was mostly poetry and storytelling. But then the New Rican Village on Avenue A between 6 and 7 was a different animal. First of all, they used the word New Rican. They didn't like to use, and this is Eddie Figueroa and other former lords that were involved with it. We were talking about a New Rican, not the New York because of the possible prejudice or whatever conceptions people have of the New York. But the New Rican, we were different. We were macrobiotics, vegetarians. Me, que me gustan los bacalaitos, la capufia, el lechón. All of a sudden, along with Jerry Gonzalez and Andy Gonzalez, rest in peace, both of them. So I got involved with that. And then, I was in heaven, man. I had a job. It wasn't a high-paying job. I didn't care, but it helped me to pay my rent and raise a family in the neighborhood. But I was also dealing with it in terms of the music. And that was very intense because the people that were hanging out in there, like Rene Lopez, Manny Oquendo, people that were, they knew about music and they shared their knowledge and they encouraged me to keep collecting music, but not only collecting music, but passing the knowledge of the music through radio shows. There's so many things that I don't realize that I did them, but it was part of, it was something normal and regular that we did, that we didn't ¿sabes? No estábamos como parando a pensar, you just kept going, and then I had a family. And I probably, looking in the present, I think one of the things that remain more connected to the neighborhood is the community gardens. Because the community gardens, besides being a place for the people to relax or whatever, have also been used as spaces for music, art, dance, and that's still happening. Think about the housing, the situation with the affordable housing. Things are getting a little hard. Look at me. Within 6 months, I might have to leave my place to be relocated, and they're going to renovate the building due to mismanagement. And then I get emotional with this, and I'm sorry. I don't know what's going to happen with me. I either have to pay market rate, probably, I don't know market rate, I might not be able to afford the apartment. So they're pushing me to go into Section 8, which I hate to do that, but it might be the only way for me to survive in the neighborhood. I think that I feel that there's a lot of hope, and there's the group of people here, the people from Repatriotas, which I have to acknowledge have been very helpful in the whatever's going on at La Sala. And I didn't get into that because that's another $20. La Sala de Pepe is just the culmination of life, of work, of getting involved in the community and giving something to the people that were affected with the pandemic. People, I'm talking about as a senior citizen, people that felt abandoned, and the La Sala has become like an oasis for them to come and sit down and talk. And there's one particular person that she comes and sits down and tells me, play me Los Panchos. And she's there 45 minutes, she doesn't say a word. I don't want to force her to talk to me. When she gets up and when she leaves, she tells me, this is a magical place. Whatever I can do for her and for other people in the neighborhood, we need spaces like this where people can go and feel welcome without no monetary pressures. If you want coffee, you want water, or you want pernil, vete donde Adela. Which is another place that we have to recognize that has been a special place in the neighborhood for many, many years. And we need to support it. So that's more or less, an overview of my life in my beloved Loisaida, which when I got there was not called Loisaida. Loisaida comes later. Because if you asked me back in the day, you would say, Pepe, where you live? Well, I wouldn't tell you, I live in the Lower East Side. I would say, I live in Loisaida. And from there, that Bimbo Rivas coined the word that as we know it of Loisaida, and that eventually through the works of people like Tato Laviera, rest in peace, and other organizations in the neighborhood, we were able to name Avenue C Loisaida Avenue. I do miss a lot of people. I mean, I remember coming out of my building, looking right, looking to the left, and I would see 10 people easily before I get to the corner. These days, it takes me a little longer for that. I can stay home and, and mope, or what is the word mope, or just a llorar al río, tú sabes. No, I said, let's open up a space that can fulfill my needs and the needs of other people in the neighborhood. And I've been lucky that a lot of people that have come forward and have made sure that this space is gonna be what it is. A community space for the people, not only the people in the neighborhood, but people beyond the Loisaida. And that's where people like Repatriotas have been part of it. I have to recognize the help of Libertad and also Luisa Center. When I started, well, this is another story.
We can do it in the present or in the.
The thing is, well, she helped me out when I proposed the idea of the Fiesta de Cruz, which was an event that was happening for many years, and then it went in the hiatus. Is that the word? Hiatus. She opened the doors of Loisaida Center and opened the wallet. That's very important. And this is the 6th or 7th year that we have been able to celebrate Fiesta de Cruz, which is going to be the first Friday in May. So if you want to come along and sing and play some instruments and eat a delicious sopón that I make, so you are invited. I don't know, I'm going to stop for now before I keep crying here. So somebody...
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Pepe. And I would like to hear a little bit more about La Sala de Pepe and some of the initiatives that are taking shape in Loisaida right now with the help of the Clemente Center and other very valuable community institutions. But first, let's vamos a montarnos en la guagua aérea, right? And go down to Puerto Rico. Jorge, Cano, your journey is a little bit the inverse of Pepe's, even though both of you were born in Puerto Rico, you in Santurce and Pepe in Puerta de Tierra. You, Jorge, became radicalized in the diaspora, specifically in the Boston area, and then you returned to Puerto Rico with a project that you had started over here, or in the Boston area, which I and others have said has contributed to dramatically transforming not just radical practices in Puerto Rico, but also the political landscape more generally. At least that's my opinion. I know that you're a little more humble and reserved than that. I'm talking, of course, about AgitArte and Papel Machete. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the origins of those two projects, focusing on the experiences that were most important to you?
Sure. But first, I have to clarify something. I mean, I was radicalized and being in Boston and through Marxist study groups and organization. At that point, Latinos y Latinas por el Cambio Social, really involved in the political prisoner fight. But my mother's not listening, but if she was, she would definitely me hubiera hablado por el oído, because I grew up in an independentista family, and my mother made sure, she wasn't a cuadro, she wasn't formed politically, but she was one of those people that are like, totally natural, understands injustice, and she was later a community organizer. And ellos militaron en el PIP en los 70, and then they left the PIP. And anyway, I remember being in the marches for in Cerro Maravilla, and after that, so my mother definitely was an influence. And my uncle, rest in peace, was who studied Marxism in UMass, the first person to talk with me about unions and anti-imperialism, etc. But yes, there were definitely, when we were in college, we were doing student organizing. We didn't even call it organizing then, right? We were mostly around forming the first Latino organization. That was Emerson College in Boston. Anyway, so we didn't call it organizing, but eventually when I graduated, I ended up doing political theater projects, first in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and then after that in Lynn. And I want to recognize Juan Carlos Ortega, who was Colombian compañero. I was a community organizer. He was really the artist. At the time, I didn't consider myself an artist. But I was an organizer, still am. And he was deported. And then by Clinton, while he was finishing his degree, and in the middle of us forming AgitArte, which didn't even call AgitArte yet, it was called Active Lynn, because we were able to, within this organization that eventually pushed me out, led by Social Democrats, IDSA, if you're out there. They pushed me out, really, and then we formed AgitArte. And AgitArte really started as a group of young people doing political theater, right? We were all youth and doing hip hop. So people really didn't take us too seriously, because hip hop then, it wasn't even a concept of, in the early 2000s when hip hop was then considered a political, right? Even though the Zulu Nation, and I want to be clear, and other people have been saying that, but really when it became a thing, a movement, the hip hop movement stuff, where they really started bringing it into politics was later. So having a hip hop spoken word and group of radical, mostly anarchists and communists, both of Lynn, folks locally, and other larger greater Boston students and other people. Again, we didn't use the term activists back then either, right? Organizers and militants and artists. So AgitArte starts really within this organization. And then as I get pushed out of the organization, we decided to start it. And really it was a very small organization back then. Our oldest founder, when I recognized Herbert Fox, he decided to put us, make us a 501c3, a nonprofit. But we were like, we didn't want to do any of that stuff. So anyway, all that just to give a context of how AgitArte started, and I go back to Puerto Rico in '99 to take care of my mother who has multiple sclerosis, and AgitArte in Lynn lasted till 2002, and basically because of, they couldn't get funding and they didn't know how to run it. But then I was able to get guaranteed a 3-year grant and started a project in Caimito. I don't know if you know Caimito. Caimito is a working class town, so like on the edge of San Juan. It should be its own town, but of course it's gobbled up by San Juan, just like Santurce was when it became Santurce. Right? So I was able to do that for 3 years, and we basically, our end was in Santurce no se vende in 2005. Very important year in Puerto Rico struggle. The next year will be 20 years. Be good to do a panel. It coincided El Cuca, which was in la UPR, really starting like what later became a much bigger student movement, really important. El Cuca, the strike of 2005. Playa Pal Pueblos, led by Amigos del Mar at that time. And Santurce no se vende. And those were 3 simultaneous struggles happening around then. And basically, we lost our funding, we lost our space. We basically, now it's going to be a dog park for Ciudadela. That was actually a community, San Mateo de Cangrejos, part of Santurce, but honestly, in the moment, later you find out it's a much longer history, right? Minillas and Centro de Bellas Artes is built on top of La 26. Well, I'm sorry, La 20, like La 21, no. I'm a little nervous. Actually, but La 21 era más arriba, Bayola era más abajo. La 21, of course, it was a black community, one of the most important black communities where Cortijo's from, and a long tradition of Boma and all that. And that was put out, and they built Centro de Bellas Artes on top. So just to say, like we at the time, you think, oh my God, we're taking up. This is a long history. Santurce itself, its origin is a gentrification term, right? San Mateo de Cangrejos got dissolved into Santurce, which was the name of the town where Ubarri, the dude who owned the trains, was from. Anyway, so Papel Machete actually it happens after that. AgitArte had basically died out, and we started basically to do something different for May 1st. I was doing a puppet show with Deborah Hunt. I say big up to Deborah Hunt, one of the most important artists in Puerto Rico. Even though she's from New Zealand, she's been in Puerto Rico more than 30 years. And the reason why there's so much puppetry in Puerto Rico is because of her. And I was doing a workshop with her, and some followers were like, yo, we want to do something different for May 1st. Can we make some masks and go to the streets? And we did that. We spent like 2 months, we did that project, and it was horrible. We did a horrible job on the streets. It rained. People sucked with masks. I was terrible in a mask. I had a half mask on. It was too big for me. I really wasn't trained for mask work. It was horrible. But at the same time, it was something really special for us, the energy. And I'll get to that later, about the energy, right? Because we saw it as a propaganda thing and an agitation thing, but also when we felt that energy, we're like, we're gonna keep doing this. And we named Papel Machete, which was a poem which Juan Carlos Ortega wrote dedicated to the struggle for Puerto Rican independence, obviously with the play of Papel Machete and Machete Macheteros. So it's a poem written by a Colombian in solidarity. So that's more or less. And then years later, when eventually Puerto Ricans start leaving Puerto Rico, artists don't have any opportunities, we decided to bring back AgitArte. And then we'll talk about that later, right? Because the history is, and I also want to read something quickly of who we are. It'll be real quick. And this one's a few things I'll read. AgitArte is an organization of working class artists and cultural organizers who work at the intersections of race, class, gender, sexuality, and ideology, which really means abolition is Black radical feminism. That's our where we ground now. This is our older writing. And through a practice of cultural solidarity, creative processes, and popular education, we initiate and facilitate art and culture projects with grassroots communities that contest U.S. cultural hegemony and propose alternatives to existing systems of oppression. We do this in our creative work by centering experience of oppressed people and resistance to interdisciplinary storytelling, media, and in our mutual solidarity through trainings, workshops, and running a physical space for educational programming in Santurce, Puerto Rico. So that's kind of like But I'll leave it there because I think the discussion is more interesting, so I want to keep going.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that, Jorge. So with that in mind, I want to then turn to the near present. We talked about the present, past, and then so I want to bring it up to the near present, which of course also involves the immediate past. We've already touched upon some of this, right? Pepe talked a little bit about La Sala de Pepe and some of the things happening in the community, but I would like to explore that a little bit more. So both Libertad or Pepe, or both of you, could you give us a little bit more of a background about the present day challenges facing the broader community in Loisaida, but then also the Puerto Rican community, or what remains of the Puerto Rican community specifically?
Sure. So today, well, gentrification, the gentrification process has nearly run its course on private properties. Loisaida retains a diverse population of working class residents, like Pepe and many others, owing in part to the concentration, not just of public housing in that area, but also rent stabilization and the property titles that were secured through the community land trust movements, mutual housing, squatting, homesteading, activism, and all those efforts from that era that we spoke about during after the RGS and Charas El Bohío and Adopt a Building. So if people like Pepe remain there, it's because of those struggles survived, even though you could say the neighborhood was the ground zero of gentrification starting in the late 80s. The cultural center that are now direct, the Clemente Soto Vélez, is part of that legacy as well. It was an abandoned school building that was reclaimed by cultural activists, Latino cultural activists. It bears the name of a political prisoner, a poet, an activist who spent a decade in federal prison for his advocacy of Puerto Rico's independence. His imprisonment actually is directly related to the conversation of political persecution in the island, And this brings, Clemente being an early example of that persecution, and this brings us to the revolving door example on motif that I think it's part of what we're exploring here, and how it's not really here or there. There's an interconnectivity and entwinement. Clemente did the rest of his life in New York City as El Carpeteo was going full speed on the island. When Clemente died in 1993, the issue of Las Carpetas, the unveiling of all of that was front and center in the island. I was in La Yupi back then. And it's not a chance that cultural activists here decided to name this center the Clemente Soto Vélez. Even when in Puerto Rico, people in Puerto Rico didn't really know who Clemente was back then. So it's amazing that in New York, it has a homage and a humongous palace building in like prime real estate in the Lower East Side called Clemente Soto Vélez. He was a mentor to countless artists from Roy Brown to Manuel Ramos Oteros, and founder organizing of the Puerto Rican Merchants Associations besides his avant-garde poetry legacy. So when Clemente died in 93, the issue of, as I said, the issue of was front and center, and Ed Vega, who's another poet, decided to name the abandoned school building which was reclaimed after him. By the way, it is important that this goes to this interconnection of arts, organizing, and political activism, that New Yorican poets were critical figures who saw the role of arts as essential in the reclamation of space and needed institution building, because if the establishment wasn't gonna include us, who would? So they knew that institution building was a part of that political process, and as Pepe mentioned before, people like Tato Laviera, Miguel Algarín, Bimbo Rivas depicted here were all crucial in all of that.
It's when you're saying naming buildings with Petro's name, we have Pedro Albizu Campo Plaza on 13th Street, 12th Street, and then we have Mariana Bracetti on 4th Street. So this is just to add to what you were saying in terms of naming these famous Puerto Rican, famous for us, Puerto Ricans in the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, it's because of that legacy, and I would just say that today the Clemente, I would have never, I was speaking about Clemente Soto Vélez, this person that is also a building. I went to his funeral back in 93 when I was in La Yupi. I would have never imagined that 3 decades later, I would be directing this space that was being founded back then. The space is, it's a city-owned building, and it's a mainstay institutional legacy of that cultural activism, and it really acts as a repository of memories, not included enough in official archives. It's a cultural hub that houses 4 theaters, 2 galleries, more than 40 artist studios at affordable rates for working artists, and I call it a gymnasium for activism to play and fail in safety. And it's really what you need. A lot of people talk about democracy or activism in the streets and protests, but you really need spaces, internal spaces for movement building. So these are the civic institutions that will pretty much guarantee that we keep our systems accountable and that we can connect to each other and think and organize. So I'll leave it there for, but that's a crux of the present, and also to explore a little bit more about the revolving the revolving door, which sometimes I call La Puerta Gulemba because of different other reasons. But yeah.
Well,
Pepe, go ahead.
besides La Sala, I have to mention Piraguas, which is another space. And the thing is that for some reason, Clemente is a huge space compared to us. We are like a speck. We're like a fly in the wall or something like that. But what matters is the impact that we have in the community. What matters is the consciousness that we are raising in there to the young people that come along. And I'm telling you, I don't get surprised anymore. I open the place, and the people that come by that are like, you can see their faces lighting up, knowing about that there's a place where they can go back to their roots and their parents and grandparents' roots. That's one of the things that we're trying to do in there. We were even thinking of like a cultural corridor. Will be Piraguas, Loisaida Center, La Sala. There's a new space that I can't recall the name, and then the Boys Cafe, which is being renovated, and we're going to lose it for about a year or a year and a half. We hope that it's the construction is much faster than that, dealing with the bureaucracy and all that shit. But I think that we have to give credit to Caridad La Bruja. I think she has done an incredible work. We needed a woman, coño, que viniera y pusiera ese sitio en el mapa otra vez. I always bet on women. I had mothers, 5 sisters, and they are my guiding light. I believe in them, and I think that we need more women in the neighborhood to sort of like, tú sabes, hacer el trabajo que los hombres no han hecho hasta hoy día. It's the truth. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Pepe. Actually, I was hoping that maybe you could tell us a little bit more about La Sala, what exactly it is, and what you do there.
Muerto
And
que de
then-
misa.
Sí, mira, pero we also have these photos that Gary Cruz was so kind as to provide to us. So if you want to comment a little bit on the photos, that would be helpful.
Well, that's Gary Cruz over there. Gary Cruz comes from being a gang member. But this one, first of all, this was not like violent gangs. This was just more like teenage clubs, you know what I mean, and hang out. But Gary, through the MFY Movement for Youth, and there was a place on 4th Street, an abandoned school that was taken over, and then there were theater classes over there given by this Oscar Chicone, the Argentinian director, and out of that came Teatro Cuatro. That's another jewel from the neighborhood that we are working for September to have an exhibit recognizing them. Teatro Cuatro eventually is the people that brought the first Festival de Teatro Latinoamericano a Nueva York, okay? Que después Joseph Papp se apropió del mismo. He also Gary, they did an incredible documentary about Adela called The Last One Standing, which you are welcome to come and watch it at La Sala de Pepe. I keep on plugging La Sala, but he gave me the opportunity and I'm going to keep on doing it. But it's a beautiful documentary about the neighborhood. You're going to laugh, you're going to cry. Whenever you want to come, you see it, you can come by La Sala, and I'm more than willing to show it to you. Of course, that's Adela's children and grandchildren. Well, Adela, of course. Of course.
Yeah, that project was something that I started commissioning artists when I was tasked with back then I was directing the Loisaida Center that had gone into a big long hiatus and needed a jump start, and the festival itself also. So we started the commission of cabezudos, this tradition that is, very folkloric, very Puerto Rico based, and of all precisely the legends of Loisaida. The only main thing, there's living legends, but they had to have passed because we didn't want infighting about like who's gonna be depicted and who's not. And I'm so glad to see that they're still around and they're loved objects in the neighborhood.
And
Yeah.
this is Adela, and the other figure.
That's Tato La Viera.
Thank you.
But there's like 7 others that I hope are well safeguarded, even though I'm not directing it.
Tato La Viera, I met Tato dancing. Tato was a badass dancer. I thought I could dance, motherfucker can dance. And I'm sorry about the good word. I mean, bad words for me are what they're doing in Palestine. Bad words for me are taking las playas y privatizándolas. Those are dirty words. Anyway, he was dancing with 2 or 3 women, and in the dancing world, no, he was that good. He could train 2 or 3 women at the same time. And me, being like un fresco, le digo, in the dancing world, when somebody's dancing like that, you say, when you go like this, don't take it another way. It just means that you want to cut in. And, you have to have balls if you want to cut in there, because if you don't look bad, you are going to have to put el rabo entre las patas y el diente por un rato largo. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then he saw me in action, and he came to me, he said, okay, Papa, you passed it great. And since then, and this before I knew Tato as a community organizer and a poet and all that. So we became really great friends. And I have to admire, and Tato, whenever he saw me, he gave me a hug. And tú sabes, un abrazo de verdad, hermano. And he loved my sister, my dear sister that was part of the Teatro Cuadro that passed away. He used to call my sister every week when she moved to Florida. He was a very special individual, not only for the poetry movement, but for the neighborhood in general. And there's another thing, back then when there was no representation, Tato and other people came with the idea of having these block parties on 10th Street and Sol Plaza. And the purpose of that was to collect, to get people to register. Because if people are not registered, they don't vote. So through this back door, we got people to register. People say, voy a votar, esa gente son lo mismo, tú sabes. He said, no, you have to register, and then we can start electing people that are going to represent us. If they turn to be bad, that's another story. But that's the thing about how music was utilized to gain other purposes, like, for example, getting people to vote. And let me tell you, I think that the effect of this, in terms of the amount of people the percentages of people that were voting, it changed radically. There are so many things that I can tell about Tato, and of course Bimbo Rivas and Chino, but Tato especially because our dancing connection that we have for many years, and él era un ávido de casadela, y parte de eso fue lo que más Tato, la chuleta y el ajo blanco con diabético es lo peor que hay. So if you are into that, please, I'm asking you to stop it. It's not a good combination. But Tato was all the way to the end. Even when he was blind, he came to the neighborhood. He was part of the neighborhood, And you got to meet Tato, and
I interviewed him for when I did my stint at CENTRO. I interviewed him here for a documentary that I helped. So.
All right, I'm sorry to cut in, but we're running out of time, and we do want to have some audience participation. So I wanted Jorge to talk a little bit about, we heard about the present day situation in the Lower East Side, and I would like to talk a little bit about the present day situation in Puerto Rico, because I know there are some important parallels, particularly with the problem of displacement and gentrification. And so, all right, tell me a little bit about what's been going on, the work that you and your organizations have done, especially since Maria, and then your assessment of the present situation for for what we're calling the radical tradition here.
Sure. Well, after Hurricane Maria, everything shifted. We talk a lot about when Papel Machete started in 2006. It was a crisis project. It was like the beginning, the marker, right? The shutdown of the government of Puerto Rico to impose the sales tax on people. It was definitely a moment. So we talk about that, and I think definitely another turning point for us in that crisis mode. And I say that people think it's a negative thing, but really it's been our way to be able to pivot and shift when it's needed, right? So it's hard for me to talk about models, but what we have done as our life project, more than an organization, as a movement organization, is to continue to pivot as it needed, and our capacity as well, right? I'm not trying to idealize what we do, but certainly. And that's been the shift from when Papel Machete started, and then also the shift when we decided to relive AgitArte so we could actually support artists and work. And it was actually, it wasn't even that we wanted to go after funding. It was that we had built so many relationships in New York, in the South, working with groups like Summoners of New Ground, which is a radical queer Southern organization we worked for years. And with that, a lot of other folks in the South, which is what we did on the EAP. We'll talk about that.
Could you repeat the group's name? I don't know.
Southerners on New Ground. It's
Southerners
a
on New
radical queer Southern organization. Anyway, working with folks, and we started developing relationships. And when the hurricane came, people started just sending us aid. I mean, because we were 15 minutes from the airport. Santurce is very close to the airport, as you know. So we became a distribution center and we helped start many of the centros de apoyo mutuo, which again were very important. And until this day, we have many of the centros de apoyo mutuo that have actually flourished, like in Lares, and other parts where people have really taken on these projects and they become economic projects, political projects. With very little resourcing, right? I feel really proud to hear all the things that we're able to do in Loisaida, but that's not the case back home, right? There's few examples far and apart, and unfortunately, maybe many of them built on old schools that were shut down by Julia Kelleher and the people before her, right? The 700 and something schools that closed on the island. But at the same time, right, some of them have become spaces of different projects, different kinds of projects. So I think it was definitely a turning point for us, and at that we were able to secure resources like we never did. So for us, and of course temporary, we know this, right? And we're very aware. And again, because I think we need a more nuanced conversation about nonprofits, really a really nuanced conversation about what is done. And Iram, I don't know if he's around, but he was around. He's done a really good podcast about it. But also how it's been for a lot of people, a lifeline, and people know it's not gonna last, but people are used any which ways, right? I believe we need nonprofit, for-profit, underground economy, cooperatives. We need anything too we can develop economic opportunity and spaces. Because space in Puerto Rico, and as you, I don't know, I'm not giving you any news, and it's out there. I don't have the numbers, but of course you all know the phenomenon of Airbnb has destroyed Santurce. We saw it coming. We saw it coming when the art, and I want to talk about this because we talk about art a lot of times as resistance. We talk about a lot of art, and we romanticize art a lot too. And I want to say that it was, I got shut down when I said that shit. Who's out there? No, but for real, because in Santurce, Santurce I have to be very clear about. And this is something that we've had conversations, people don't want to hear, but projects like Santurce's Ley, Los Muros Hablan really accelerated the possibilities. And then Santurce became the Brooklyn of the Caribbean suddenly. I grew up in Santurce, it was still a black neighborhood, and then it was completely abandoned by white flight in the 50s because people wanted to move to the suburbs. And then for 30 years, it was completely abandoned. And then of course, artists are gonna live with this cheap rent, and that's fine, that's super dope. They can't live there anymore. But these festivals that became events, which a lot of great artists participated because there's so very little opportunities in Puerto Rico. So really taking a stand as a radical artist, not only you get shunned, usually, it's like, oh yeah, whatever, it's not real art what you all do, or so it's a reality. With years, we've proven commitment to artists of all kinds, right? This is not an attack on specific artists, but it's a phenomenon that we have to come to grips with. Just like what's come to grips with the crisis we are on the left in Puerto Rico, what has happened is not a negative thing, it's a reality never to understand. So we try to respond to that within our work, and and again, I think there's a lot of limits of what can be done, but there's a lot of people who I think went and because of the hurricane had possibilities to start projects. There's a lot of small projects all throughout the island, which I think has been, and you do a great job to start to mention a lot of the projects in your article, Mapping the Left. I'm sorry, I'm saying the name wrong, but something about Mapping the Left. Can you say it? Please plug yourself.
It's Mapping the Radical Imagination, and it's in one of the recent numbers of New Politics. I don't think we have one at the book table, but yeah, anyway, that's the article.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. So we say it again, Saulo? Oh, got a copy of it. Somebody wants to check it out.
Saulo has copies. If anyone wants one, just jump on him.
So I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question? Yeah, it was a two-part, perhaps.
No, just your comment on the situation of radical struggles in Puerto Rico since Maria.
And I think we're in a point where it's a transition. I think we're going to see a lot of groups start, a lot of groups end, a lot of people developing the skills even to start formations. But I think that we have to be serious and look at what's happened in Puerto Rico to the left and how we've been defeated in a lot of ways, and what it means a new resurging from that. And there are many examples of groups doing it from different fronts. And also, at least when the Rosselló, the whole thing, people did come together, right? and try to build stuff, and some groups grew because of that, you know, and other contradictions surface, of course, people were in a colony. But I think that we're in a very interesting moment politically. It can seem very grim. I have friends who ask me, is there any like hope for the Puerto Rican independence movement? And I'm like, well, how are we going to be looking at this? Are we going to deepen the conversation? We talked about it earlier about liberation. So we're going to end up with some neocolonial situation. So are we going to really deepen that conversation and look at what are different approaches? And you mentioned it earlier, someone mentioned the fact that, or maybe it was Saulo, about different strategies, and Edie's talked about it as well. But it doesn't mean we don't have to be critical, we don't have to have the difficult conversations as well, and create those spaces. But in the meantime, I think what a lot of people are doing are creating spaces, you know, and all throughout the island, and I think that's been positive, at least for now. But yet, we still have to be able to build a mass, you know, left movement, a radical movement that can actually, you know, have some power on the island.
Wonderful, thank you, Jorge. And so on that note about space and creating spaces and making the connection to art and the ability to imagine new possibilities, before we open up to Q&A, which we definitely want to engage the audience.
Something short. When we're talking about this moment connection between Loisaida and Puerto Rico, la diaspora, right now, I just came from Puerto Rico, and at the University of Puerto Rico, the Centro de Estudiantes, we put up an exhibit of 54 album covers reflecting las caras lindas. And you know, when I talk about cara linda, you know the ones that I'm talking about. And if you go into Puerto Rico, it will be up until March 16. Please check it out. Also, you can look in la Sala de Pepe Instagram, and you can see the exhibit. There's a video of the exhibit. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Pepe. And so, in order to stimulate that imagination of the radical imagination, right? I wanted to end this part of the conversation reflecting on Bimbo Rivas and his poem Loisaida from 1974, which I believe the notion of Loisaida as a state of mind came later, but this is where the word Loisaida, as far as I have found, can be traced back to. So I'm just going to read it quickly as a kind of pie forzado, right, for us to talk about that. So Bimbo said, I dig the way you talk, I dig the way you look, me vacila tu cantar, y yo me la juego fría para que vivas para siempre en mi mente, mi amada, yo te llamo Loisaida. So it's almost like a love poem, right, but to this space, right? This imagined space as he imagined and felt it and lived it, right? And so I think this photograph, which is very kind of iconic, as you know the kids say these days, which is from our archive, by the way, here at CENTRO, kind of reflects a lot of what, to me, of the feeling that is part of that poem. So on that note, I would like Libertad to talk to us a little bit about this mural in particular, right, which to me says a lot about these connections that we're trying to draw here between spaces, right, between Loisaida, the Lower East Side, and Santurce particularly, but obviously all spaces where people are struggling to liberate themselves and to decolonize and to make a better world.
This was recently commissioned, and it lives in the La Plaza parking lot of the Clemente has a parking lot that we also call it La Plaza because we activate it with events, and it was commissioned permanently there by artists Molly Crapapple and Miguel Treyes, and it depicts the two neighborhoods are flanking the centerpiece, Santurce to the left, Loisaida to the right. There's little egg hunts that even say La Casa de Pepe, La Sala de Pepe, I'm sorry. And Charas lives and different things, the great work of this both are artistic collaborations. The center part is a homage, and it depicts that revolving door that I was talking about and how it links to space. It's what Moncho, my partner, he calls it, for the Clemente in particular, the puerta gulemba. At times, it gets stuck, se tranca, a veces va bien rápido, revuelve out of control, and we jump all in together, como si fuéramos sardinas, but that revolving door has connected us at a grassroots level pretty effectively. This is an example of it. Tito Matos, the great Tito Matos, activist, cultural organizer, plenero, his wife and family, they were essential parts of the Clemente during their decade living in New York City. And pretty much that, it prefigured that Clemente as a format, prefigured what ended up becoming the reclaiming of another abandoned school building, La Goico, in Santurce. So that's the type of revolving door that we mean. From the Young Lords to AgitArte, between Loisaida, El Barrio, Santurce, Rio Piedra. I'm going to even add Coupé there because no one ever in an academic context has mentioned Coupé. But what I mean is, like, the title of this panel is telling us that it says from Loisaida to Santurce as in A to Z, but we could also mean it with the sense of Loisaida to Santurce as is from here to there. One example of that from here to there is, as I say, Laguarta to Santurce. We can, you don't even know how many times Tito and Mariana, the founders, hang out at the Clemente, and it's that arroz con the things that you were remembering with Tato and so forth, that play a kind of activism and a repository of memories. And the question that I have is, like, how do you make it more of a permanent framework? I think that, for example, places like El Fideicomiso del Caño Martín Peña is also part of that example of that revolving door, and many activisms here in New York City to emulate community land trusts. That could point towards a framework of how communities and the organizing is not weaponized against us, because the land is owned in perpetuity by the organizations and the outcomes of our sweat. And it's not weaponized to displace us later on. I would just close by saying, in my part, is that I'm also part of a community group called South Bronx Unite that is paying homage, obviously, to the Young Lords, and is more anchored in the South Bronx, and the Loisaida and the South Bronx have very entwined histories as well. And we just reclaimed an abandoned city-owned building that was the Lincoln Detox, an alternatives to methadone place. And we're setting the precedent that the city, for the first time, has given this abandoned building to a community land trust for cultural reasons. It's gonna be a cultural center. And it sets precedents for so many others to start doing development from the ground up. And knowing that when we say perpetuity, that's the actual enemy of extractive, extractive development. It's like, it relates everything to memory, to storytelling, because we're not going away, we're here in perpetuity. So that's my reflection.
There, in that painting, there's Sammy Tanco. One of the best planeros that ever came through New York, especially in the Lower East Side. I don't know if you know, Sammy Tanco went to La Goico.
He was the mentor of Tito Matos, and he was from Loisaida, so that's why part of the commission was Sammy Tanco from Loisaida, Tito Matos from Santurce. We didn't know this panel was gonna exist, but so it's the authenticity of really what we're talking about here. And they were completely intertwined, and just like that, also you're intertwined with your brother in ¿cómo es que se llama el otro que da los tours?
Lester.
Yeah, I call him the Pepe Flores of Santurce.
Don't get me in trouble, but it was very interesting that they, and I don't know if you know that Sammy Tanco went to La Goico and his sister. And Sammy Tanco, well, on top of that, Cortijo y Maelo, besides being musicians, ellos eran albañiles. ¿Y quién era el empleador de ellos? El papá de Sammy Tanco. Un hombre negro que tenía una compañía de construcción en Villa Palmeras. So you saw the connection between, I mean, to me it was very significant that, well, not significant, but important that Tito saw and Sammy not just a friend, but a mentor and a teacher. Being from, and I don't know, I mean, life, tú sabes, la vida es una tómbola. Y la cosa con Sammy Tanco, él le tenía mucho respeto a Sammy Tanco.
Thank you, Libertad and Pepe. Okay, we are running out of time quickly, and we do want to have audience participation, but first I would like to quickly plug Papel Machete's wonderful play on the eve of abolition. So I'm going to give Jorge a couple of minutes to tell us about how this play, which we hope, right, crossing our fingers, will someday come to New York. We don't know yet. But tell us how you work with the radical imagination on the eve of abolition o en la víspera de la abolición.
It is the year 2047. Puerto Rico is free, and we are in the Alianza Antillana. La flotilla libertaria, liderada por Tanco, not Sammy, but same family, fictional character. Viene de Matanza, que en Matanza tenemos el primer congreso. I'm sorry, speaking in Spanish, I speak English. Jesus Christ, code switching. Although Tato Laviera would say mixturao is the language of the future. Yes. He was right about that. Anyway, let me continue. So it's 2047, Puerto Rico, the flotilla libertaria is going towards Bopancha to meet up with other abolitionists, which are coming together to go to the last prison, which is in a town created in 2022 called Green Springs, which is a green, sustainable town started by prison executives and SpaceX type groups. And this place basically has a jail. And the jail, they mine water, which they ship to they fly to the space colonies where the bourgeoisie lives. Our main character, Neva, is a storyteller, revolutionary from Puerto Rico, who's going with a crew of vejigantes, revolutionary vejigantes, over to help out because they have virtual imaging systems, which is really like the American lie, right? It's all metaphor of the US today. Virtual imaging systems that cloak also their borders. But of course, the vejigantes have experience and expertise, and together with Neva, they go to support the abolitionists and taking down this last prison of territories for liberated lands, formerly known as the United States of America. That's the purpose of the story exactly. So, you want anybody to class or they'll hear that. And then, of course, it's a metaphor. It's really a metaphor of the present, right? It's really a metaphor of the present, and also a metaphor. It's not an idealized version of a future, which is fine. I know some people see radical imaginary as an idealized future, but very much we're talking about a future of survival. Is informed by all the work after the hurricane. It's informed by really the conditions of South, and it's also the fact that we as South, as global South, are important to understand and to go back to anti-imperialism. And there's a lot of knowledge, and this is something that goes on forever, right? Can you imagine, the U.S. without a global South? Is a revolution going to happen in the U.S.? So that's kind of the premise. It's a project we worked for 4 years. It's a puppet and mask project, like most of the work we do. It's our first big project, right? We wanted to really take on aesthetics to a different level. We usually do street theater stuff that's very short, done in a couple months. This has been a 4.5-year project, and it's allowed us to grow it. And we'll be actually premiering in the U.S. The premiere will be in Boston the first weekend of November. We're trying to find still theater in New York here. So if you trying, but you all are hard. It's hard, but we'll see. If you all got ideas.
Don't make it seem like we don't want to host it. The Clemente is under needed renovation to make the building accessible.
Right, that's true. The Clemente is the only spot we're like, damn it, it's not ready. Damn it. Anyway.
Well, hopefully,
we'll find a spot.
All right, folks. So we have about 14 minutes left. Hopefully, we can extend that a little bit. I don't know if there's anyone here who can, but we'll just keep going till they kick us out. So if anybody has any questions, comments, please step up to the mic.
Yes. Hi, Marina Ortiz again. I always have something to say or ask, and I want to ask you to bring that here to El Barrio, okay? And I want to contrast the institutions that we have lost here in El Barrio that were founded by Puerto Ricans, and I would even dare say El Museo del Barrio is one of them. The Julia de Burgos Latino Cultural Center has been closed for the better part of 10 years. And so, to Pepe, we cannot always rely on the elected officials to help us. In fact, they have been instrumental here in El Barrio for defunding a lot of the Puerto Rican-founded organizations and for taking away community control from the Julia de Burgos. I have made it my mission to find alternative spaces, and one of them is the People's Church, First Spanish United Methodist Church, which the Young Lords Party took over. So I've been working with them for a few years, and I also very much am a champion for the murals in El Barrio because that's another form and that's another cultural space that we create outside to honor our ancestors, right? And so I invite you to come to the People's Church because we really want to restart and reignite that cultural and political tradition in the Puerto Rican community here in El Barrio. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Do we have any other questions so we can take a few and yeah, Jorel?
Yo hablo bastante duro.
Tú no tienes problema con eso, dale.
Este es bien importante, yo lo voy a hablar en mi lengua nativa, lo siento por los que no ¿verdad? Han aprendido español todavía. Yo quiero comentar, hay dos cosas, yo creo que tanto Santurce como el Loisaida han estado amenazados por una bestia, ¿verdad? Que es el colonialismo. Ese colonialismo, uno tiene apellido, yo lo mencioné, un colonialismo capitalista. Y para mí es bien importante contextualizar esta lucha porque hay una intersección entre el bienestar, la lucha en todos los niveles y la cultura. Y una de las cosas que se ponen con la cultura, tanto Libertad como Pepe, y Libertad específicamente mencionaba lo importante de tener un espacio físico. Y esa parte es importante. Muchas veces yo soy psicólogo clínico, trabajo en el Roberto Clemente Center, ¿verdad? En Loisaida por 19 años, una clínica comunitaria perteneciente a los hospitales públicos que trabajamos desde la terapia de familia, incluyendo la cultura, ¿verdad? Que es una parte importante, incluyendo el contexto político. Y tanto a la Sala de Pepe, como a Piragua, como a Clemente Soto, son cosas que yo tengo en mi computadora porque son parte del tratamiento. Cuando una persona viene, yo lo conozco, lo veo, y lo primero que empiezo a trabajar y a decirle, mira, que hay un calendario de Clemente Soto Vélez. Porque una de las cosas que se está destrozando con la gentrificación son la noción de comunidad. Y uno de los elementos que más afecta a la salud mental es no tener un sentido de pertenencia. Entonces, esos espacios, además de ser culturales, también son espacios de organización de lucha en el momento que cuando una persona, sea quien sea, tenga lo básico, depresión o ansiedad, sabe que son, por decir dos, pues mira, tener un sitio donde ir y poder sentarse ahí y que no te pidan que compres un café cuando no tienes 2 pesos, disculpen, 5. 5. O cuando te están cambiando el nombre a Alphabet City. O sea, lo que están haciendo es, ¿verdad?, destruyendo el estado natural de una comunidad que forma una cabeza de playa de protección, replica su cultura y su tradición y evoluciona. Cuando Bimbo dice, Loisaida stay on mind, o sea, para mí es importante porque el stay on mind es un imaginario que no muere. Y no muere no por cosas románticas, no mueren porque los de siempre están siempre buscando cómo quedarse con todo. Y para mí es bien importante, quizás habló de cultura y qué sé yo, mira, nosotros protestamos bailando. ¿Sabes? La bomba no baila el ritmo de los tambores. El bailador baila lo que siente y los tambores traducen ese ritmo. Y esa metáfora es importante. Tenemos nuestro ritmo y no se va a ir. Pero eso hay que protegerlo y luchar.
Bueno, pero mira, sí, a veces si no bailas bien, el tambor te cambia el tumbado, así que tienes que tener también, sí, es que estoy de acuerdo, pero también tengo que decir algo, porque sí se puede también eliminar todo Santurce, por ejemplo, y mantener la cuestión cultural light y la gente que estuvo antes y hacerles homenaje y hacer una exhibición en el MAC. O sea, que tú puedes como quiera destruir una comunidad clase trabajadora negra que ha sido desplazada, desde Cangrejo hasta lo poquito que queda ahora en casi todo Santurce, que ya Palmera está lleno ya de Airbnbs y Barrio Obrero ni se diga, ya cruzaron el expreso, papi, ya no están en la Loisaida nada más, tú sabes. Miramar, olvídate, ¿sabes? Los costos de vida, una cosa absurda. O sea que se puede absorber, hay espacios culturales para absorber todas esas expresiones culturales y como quiera desplazar a las comunidades que existen ahí.
La parte importante de esto, que es lo que iba, un ejemplo de eso son los jardines comunitarios.
Y
O sea,
sacarlo
sí.
del acto de especulación. Ahí es que está todo. Por eso es que hablé de los fideicomisos y los community land trusts. Porque los mejores gestos pueden ser cooptados. Y no es culpa del gesto, es del cinismo el modus operandi en que estamos. Gracias por hablar desde tu perspectiva clínica de que la cultura no es esencial y tiene que ver con los determinantes de la salud. Ahora, la cultura, como millones de otras cosas, puede backfire por otras razones que son de otras cosas del sistema. Y ahí es que estamos tratando de apuntar a cómo buscamos infraestructura que no sean cooptables. Un modelo puede ser el fideicomiso, y que de hecho es por lo cual tanta gente en Loisaida todavía permanecen y no fueron desplazados por esas luchas tanto de jardines como de branding el lugar, y las memorias y el storytelling es parte de esa resistencia. Si tú la borras, olvídate de organizar cualquier resistencia y cualquier pushback por ser anglicista.
Gracias. Lo último, las memorias empiezan por ocupación. Y yo creo que este día se ha visto cómo la ocupación creó todo un movimiento, y habría que repensarlo como estrategia principal para preservar los fideicomisos.
Okay. Aguante, que tenemos más preguntas, y de hecho tenemos un par de comentarios o preguntas, ¿verdad? Que no sé si quieran también contestar. So, Jorel, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Primero que todo, gracias por esta mesa. I think it was incredibly enriching and inspiring. So thank you to all of you. I just wanted to echo a comment that José made at the beginning, and I'm sorry that I'm an academic and this is more of a comment than a question, but I do have a question. But I just wanted to highlight something that José said about Papel Machete and the importance of transforming the cultural landscape of the left in Puerto Rico, and I just wanted to highlight that because I think that Papel Machete, for me, seeing it from the outside, in every single May Day, in every single protest, seeing Papel Machete and I occupied university on May 1st during the strikes, seeing la maestra de la federación at every rally, for me that was transformative. So I wanted to say thank you to Gano, and also, I didn't know Gano in 2011, and we organized an anarchist conference on a zero budget, and we invited Papel Machete, and they said yes, and they went and they performed, and they did not charge anything in el Ateneo Puertorriqueño, and so that's the type of commitment that they have.
That was a good one.
Yeah. And so for the question, one of the things that I've been thinking throughout the day, I'm a historian, so I've been thinking about history and about memory, and I really like this idea that Libertad mentioned of El Clemente as this repository of memories, right? So I was thinking about the archives. Today we've been thinking about the Puerto Rican radical tradition, and that entails sort of a cross-generational dialogue, right? And so for those generations that are coming up later, how can they know about La Sala? Like, are there papers? Are there archives? El Clemente, do you have like an internal archive of the process of creating that Papel Machete, AgitArte? I know you all have When We Fight, We Win, but do you have like papers that historians in the future can go and look back on these projects and document it, right? Because if not, these sort of projects tend to disappear from the memory. And I think that's how hegemonic sort of colonial narratives of Puerto Rico and the Puerto Rican community operate, oftentimes erasing these stories. So I was interested in the archives. Are there papers, archives that we can consult, or future historians?
We have our own archives in our house, and we're working on those. I mean, everything all of our artwork, we try to keep our artwork, whatever we print in el archivo, en la UPI. But yeah, that's a big issue, right? A resource, right? We barely can stop to even reflect on the work, right? We're constantly trying to move forward. But there's an area, actually, José and I have been talking about a few years and working, together, to get that, build long-term relationships with academics, where it's not extraction coming to find out what we do, but like really how can we build, and use these institutions to actually radicalize them, right? Oh, by the way, statehood is not a decolonizing option for Puerto Rico. Just so I say here.
That's right.
It's not. It's by definition, it's not.
Just gonna say that it's been really difficult to do the institution building. It's because of what the panel mentioned before. There's not enough capacity for people to do that. I think CENTRO has the archives of Ed Vega, which probably mentions a bit of the goes into the founding of the Clemente. They also have the archives of Marlis Momber and Charas, and it's interconnected. One thing that we try to do, and obviously this is not the domain of cultural centers like ours or curators, but we did try to do, and I invite you to go see it, ALS, Activist States of the Lower East Side.org, is to transform what was an exhibit based on archival work and history of different movement buildings in the Lower East Side, with all that archive into timelines, into space, into the interconnection. So it's an interpretative tool that can grow, and it's based on a lot of archives, but it doesn't just leave it there as digitization alone. It's about an interpretation tool that you can, I don't know, imprimir. So that's our effort. But that's not to say that we need academia to work with cultural centers, because we are the people that also receive the vernacular knowledge of a lot of people that don't dare come to academia to give their collections. They trust us. They don't necessarily trust academia. So we should be working more together into those cross-sectoral collaborations between academia and cultural work, because I don't want to mission drift. I don't want to become you guys, but where is the common ground where we can work together on that?
In two parts, I have a comment as well as latter part question. Thank you to the panelists for continuing to center us. Your work does not get unnoticed, and I just wanted to commend your efforts and how you continue to gather community. And this is of great importance of knowledge that we continue to do this work together. And speaking of collaborative work and continuing to build community, my question is for you, Gano, with regards to rematriation efforts for those who have decided to take the leap of faith and return back to the motherland, whether it's on a part-time basis or a full-time basis. Are there any organizations or are there efforts being put forth for that rematriation process within the arts community or even outside of the arts community? Because I'm finding in the scope of this work, and just as a diasporican, that many of us continue to live off of a point of nostalgia, right? And we've often had conversations of this, and upon our arrival, we lack community. We lack community in Puerto Rico. And I wanted to understand or ask you, are there any efforts being made or are there any established groups that you could direct us to that we could cultivate and we could be received within community and understand that without one another, those liberation efforts don't exist. So, and this is a much more in-depth conversation, and I'm sorry that we're running out of time. And also, circling back to collaborative work, we would love to expand on the conversation of bringing your work to La Sala. This is what we're centering on, building or continuing to build those bridges, especially for this month, right? We have the abolition of slavery in Puerto Rico. That's March 22nd. I couldn't think of anything better to highlight and to gather community at La Sala, centering this ongoing issue. Thank you.
I'll try to make it brief. The first comment I want to make again is thank you for helping me think about a problem in El Barrio, right here in East Harlem, and how to figure out that problem, how to look at it in different ways. And I want to thank the woman in the red sweater who brought up Julia de Burgos. I'd like to talk to you later, because I've started becoming much more active in things that I thought were okay and are not okay. El Barrio is losing its sense of community. It's losing its cultural and arts organizations. The arts organizations and the Museo and Julia de Burgos, places that were very established and had so many events, things happening like maybe 20 years ago, it's not. It's not happening, and I'm very upset because I wanted to participate. And I wanted my granddaughter to have that sense of culture and the arts. It's not really happening. So I become so concerned. I'm trying to unite with other people. And the first problem I want to tackle is the problem of Julia de Burgos. And so I want to, especially if there are young people here, because we need new blood. We have to save Julia de Burgos, and we have to make it functional. We have to make it serve the community and what its original intention was. I'm going to be going up to Somos, Albany, to try to talk to some legislators. I want to put that up there. And the other thing that I want to ask, en la marqueta, that's another thing. The other thing I want to ask is maybe to talk to the Soto Clemente people and the people on the board, because you have so much knowledge about what worked. And also to continue to start a conversation with CENTRO, because you brought up the culture and the arts and the dialogue and the memories, and we really need to connect with CENTRO, with the community and what's happening here. And how can we bring things back to life and create the community that we're losing? Thank you, that's it.
My name is Taina Traverso. For those, a veces traviesa, pero no siempre, I want to just add that I hear a lot of gloom about El Barrio. We do have our issues like any place else, but we also have a lot of spark that people need to share. I'm the founder of the context of Papele, the Papele contest. We're going into our 10th year. That's one way of holding on to the culture. So I need to share that. In addition to that, I was one of the board of directors of Acacia. So we actually engage Loisaida with some of the events that you have. So I was one of the founders there. In addition to that, I also have the Manhattan East Side Environmental Justice Consortium for the east side of Manhattan. And that's because we have issues. And the reason why that was found was because the west side air quality is better than the east side. So we're using the arts. September 7th, we're having the first El Barrio Environmental Justice Parade. Okay? There's a lot going on. So I have to share this because it's not all gloom in El Barrio. We're still working. And I remember that you were dancing Salsa Wednesday. In fact, you danced with me once. Okay? So, okay. I was actually the host, and I always ended the event by saying, Mambo was invented by the dancing gods. I am an African Boricua, and I have that education. El barrio no está muerto. El barrio vive y tiene espíritu. We just have to connect. Okay, there's a lot going on. So I needed to share that. Okay, so we need to come together and also be part of that. And as far as a puppeteer, we're definitely going to have puppets as part of this parade. So we're going to start on 96th Street, straight down to 106th Street, turn into the block. It's going to be closed, and we're also going to have the park. It's going to be huge because we have issues in El Barrio. So we all have to do what we need to do because we all have the leadership to make sure things happen. So El Barrio también. There's a lot that came out of the barrio that fed a lot of people, right? From the east to the west. Again, my name is Taina Traverso. A veces atraviesa, pero no siempre. Thank you.
Gracias. Okay, so I'm going to give our panelists a chance to respond in general to those questions and comments. And then we have to go, but there is one announcement. Pepe, I haven't forgotten, but we can do that at the end. I would like to give everybody a chance to.
It's a suggestion to you guys, and I think there is something that is happening in Puerto Rico and in New York that we don't see it as a liberating thing, but it's bomba. La bomba es un elemento increíble de liberación. Y que lo están liderando son las mujeres. la bomba puertorriqueña no hubiera sobrevivido si no fuera por las mujeres. En esa nota, yo entrevisté ya 5 mujeres en un proyecto uno de los primeros proyectos que hicimos en la sala fue las mujeres las mujeres de la bomba en la diáspora. Y si tienen la oportunidad de verlo en Loisaida Center YouTube channel, pero yo creo que se merece something like this. Gente de Puerto Rico, Chicago, Nueva York, enfocando el elemento ese liberador de la bomba y es una cosa que en Puerto Rico está bien, pero bien fuerte. O sea, hay gente tocando bomba en todos los pueblos de la isla en este momento y estamos hablando de un movimiento que está como subterráneo, pero que hay que apoyarlo porque todas las cosas que nosotros hacemos, de teatro, de cualquier evento que nosotros tenemos, la bomba tiene que estar presente. Es un elemento de liberación que no podemos negarlo y hay que sacarlo para afuera con más fuerza.
Gracias, Pepe. ¿Algún otro? Would anybody else like to answer any of the questions that were raised?
Yo creo que no tengo tiempo para hacerle justicia a tu pregunta, pero sí me gustaría, yo creo que está relacionado para hacerlo, y que lo quiero recalcar eso. Yo creo que debemos seguir teniendo esta conversación de qué es la tradición radical puertorriqueña, porque para mí mi interpretación es que existe la puertorriqueñidad porque hay una historia radical de lucha. Y también podemos hablar de estos aspectos culturales, porque más allá también una cultura de lucha y resistencia, que no más allá de eso. Y también recordar que sí, que tendría cuidado desde la identidad, tendría cuidado desde la cultura, desde el folclore, de que sigamos apoyando eso, pero de verdad tenemos que tener una conversación seria de qué significa de aquí hacia adelante con una puertorriqueñidad que sigue evolucionando en un país que está siendo recolonizado por gringos otra vez, un país que se ve bien diferente, con una juventud que no tiene conocimiento de la historia, que están cerrando escuelas. O sea, que tenemos que de verdad proponernos esta pregunta nuevamente y no solamente hablar de los grandes proyectos que están pasando, sí. Y lo digo en el trabajo, lo que nosotros hacemos no es lo que nos gusta, no es la finalidad, no es el nivel que quisiéramos estar, es lo que podemos hacer con los pocos recursos, pero hay muchas más posibilidades de trabajo si de verdad consideramos lo que es la pregunta, ¿verdad? De cuál es nuestra radical y qué va a ser nuestra radicalidad hacia un futuro con una puertorriqueñidad cambiante y evolucionante. Y eso es una cosa que hacen colectivamente. Y ese es el reto, ¿no? Quiero eso, pues dejarnos con el reto, porque me quedo pensando y me quedo con ese reto de verdad, cómo vamos a tener las conversaciones serias y cómo vamos a poder echar para adelante y seguir existiendo de verdad con esa cultura de resistencia y de lucha. Porque sí nos pueden absorber y dejarnos los cuchifritos y dejarnos la cultura que va a ser resistencia, pero eso no es lo que es la puertorriqueñidad en su totalidad. Y para mí es la lucha, lo que hemos sido, y poder estar aquí hoy en día hablando de la puertorriqueñidad, gracias a toda esa gente que hizo la lucha antes, ¿verdad? A todas las personas que presenten y las que vinieron antes que no están aquí, de verdad, porque por eso que estamos aquí, por esa ancestralidad de lucha, esas generaciones de lucha constante.
Any closing thoughts? No? Okay. Bueno, pues,
That's the closing.
okay. Bueno, pues we do have a closing announcement. Pepe, I believe there's an event coming up at La Sala that you wanted to announce.
Well, we are working something with the people that are coming to the parade, la gente de Repatriotas.
Gracias con the efforts of Jeremia y otras personas, we're bringing people over for the parade so that they can share their experiences and their efforts in Puerto Rico.
Basically,
Individual activists that are doing it.
follow La Sala en Instagram. Gracias a Verónica, que es la persona que se encarga de eso. Y nada, la Sala y Loisaida están abiertas, las puertas están abiertas para que vengan y participen, por favor.
Pepe, había una actividad con Rita Indiana.
No, ¿tú sabes lo que pasa? Que la actividad es una clase realmente. Y yo quiero, ¿sabes? Pueden venir después de las 7:30. Es lo que pasa. Y va a ser en Loisaida Center, no va a ser en la sala porque se va a llenar demasiado y entonces me voy a buscar un problema en la sala de overcrowded. Pero la actividad es el 15 de marzo. Sí, 15 de marzo. Y va a ser en Loisaida Center. Y por favor vengan después de las 7:30. Como les digo, síganlo en Instagram, en la Sala de Pepe. Y va a ser muy interesante, pero lleguen después de las 7:30 porque me voy a meter en un lío si llegan más temprano. Esa es una razón para llegar tarde a una actividad, ¿ok?
Okay, gracias, Pepe. Thank you all for sticking around so long. I mean, the room is still almost full. That's amazing. Gracias a ustedes. Y
Espérate, dos cositas antes de
la primera de muchas.
Yeah, sorry, gracias. Gracias por estar aquí hoy, hanging with us the whole day. It's been really incredible. I want to thank Clemente Soto Vélez for being here, Sala de Pepe, AgitArte. This is the incredible ending to this day that we needed to really reinvigorate ourselves and what it means to do community work, radical community work. I also want to invite all of you to join us for our symposium on April 12th. It's online. It's a virtual symposium, and it is called At the Edge of Each Other's Battles, which is a quote from Audre Lorde. It's Puerto Rican, Palestinian, Black, and Indigenous futures, and it's going to be a whole day symposium with 3 panels of scholars, Puerto Rican, Palestinian, Black, and Indigenous scholars talking about our overlapping histories of colonialism, dispossession, and their research. In this moment, we need to support one another more than ever, and this is an opportunity for us to step in and have each other's backs and to really create spaces for these kinds of conversations. And we know that all of our community is doing so much in every corner. And one of the things I want to remind all of us here as we're talking about Loisaida, Spanish Harlem, Santurce, lo que sea, es que we have to trust in the decolonial process, that in every corner of our worlds, we have to really believe that our comrades and our community are doing the work and not have to micromanage how they're doing it, to really truly believe in it, and to know in your heart that as you're doing your work, someone else is doing it somewhere else as well. And that if we're really strong in that belief and that understanding, then our radical futures will be right here, right? But it is about trusting in that and trusting in one another. So thank you all for trusting us, for being here, and I hope that we can continue to build with one another. Thank you so much.